6 decades of war, 500,000 lives lost. Since the 1970s, Colombia has been torn apart by a relentless conflict between drug cartels, guerrillas and government forces. But in 2016, hope emerged when a ceasefire agreement between the government and guerrilla rebels was signed. Then in 2022, President Gustavo Petro vowed to deliver total peace, but the hope was short-lived. Violence erupted again as rival insurgent groups clashed for control. Presidential hopeful Miguel Uribe Turbay was shot in daylight. And now a new front line. Social media, where gangs glamorize crime to recruit vulnerable children. Colombia stands on the brink. Is this a new chapter in the war that will never end? Colombia's conflict stretches back over a century, born from deep rural poverty and a fragile state. For decades, violence ruled. Leftist guerrillas battled the government, drug cartels waged bloody wars, and right-wing paramilitaries spread terror. Groups fell, new ones rose, and the violence endured. But by the 2010s, a turning point. The once powerful leftist guerrilla group, the FARC, was in decline. Under President Santos, peace talks led to a historic 2016 deal.
We were effectively in a tactical stalemate. The state was not capable of taking over the territory the FARC controlled, but the FARC was also not capable of expanding further.
The aim of that deal was that the FARC group would put down its arms and become a political organization.
This was an opportunity for the Colombian state to take control of its full territory, something that historically it had never achieved.
But shortly after it had been signed, the fractures began to show.
The peace deal left a power vacuum, one quickly filled by rival insurgent groups.
Other armed and criminal groups were much more effective at taking control of those areas, many of which included some of the most lucrative trafficking routes.
And in fact, possibly the situation became more difficult.
The nation hung in the balance, but now a former guerrilla, Gustavo Petro, offered a new path. After taking office in 2022, he vowed total peace, negotiations with all armed groups. On the ground, 3 major factions held power, standing between Colombia and the peace Petro promised. The Gulf Clan emerged from the ashes of Colombia's right-wing paramilitaries to become its most powerful drug cartel, with influence stretching from coastal jungles to bustling cities.
When the Gulf Clan hold an area, they are essentially the de facto state. They are governing. They are charging taxes in the form of extortion. They are regulating the economy.
It appeared to have a bit of a blow to its hierarchical structure in 2023 when its leader, Dairo Usuga, was finally tracked down close to the border with Panama.
This is Colombia's biggest drug kingpin after he was finally captured. Dairo Antonio Usuga, better known as Otoniel, had a $5 million bounty placed on his head by the United States.
After Otoniel's extradition, the group declared all businesses would close, all roads would shut down, schools, hospitals, all services were closed. It was a very powerful demonstration of just how big of a threat they are.
Formed in 1964, the ELN emerged as a Marxist guerrilla force driven by Colombia's rural inequality. Unlike the FARC, it rejected peace, continuing attacks on military targets, oil pipelines, and civilian infrastructure.
The ELN's power has never been in the number of men it has in arms, but rather its capacity to install itself on community dynamics and the local economy.
In January this year, we've seen a very serious conflict on the border of Venezuela between elements of the ELN and elements of the FARC.
Refugees from the Catatumbo region keep lining up at this stadium in the city of Cucuta, fleeing clashes between ELN rebels and FARC dissidents.
The ELN entered Catatumbo with the goal of exterminating the perceived social base of its rival. What that meant was assassinating social leaders and other individuals that it perceived to be closer to a rival armed group.
Whenever it seems to be necessary, it reminds Colombia and the rest of the world that it hasn't been weakened by the 2016 peace deal. It's probably been strengthened.
In the aftermath of the 2016 peace deal, not all FARC guerrillas laid down their arms.
You really have two categories of FARC dissidents. Those who never signed the 2016 peace agreement. Then you have dissidents who have emerged in the years since.
The most significant calls itself the ENC. Just in March this year, there were a series of attacks blamed on the ENC on police stations in southwestern Colombia.
At least 4 people have been killed in multiple coordinated attacks in Colombia. The explosions targeted police stations in Cali, the country's 3rd largest city.
These guys were using drones, sophisticated attack that had been planned to remind people trying to negotiate with them just how powerful they remain.
All of these organizations have felt the imperative to grow very quickly. Recruitment has across the board escalated every year.
Social media platforms like TikTok have become recruitment tools for armed groups, where criminal life is glamorized to lure vulnerable children into their ranks.
The types of activities that armed and criminal groups are engaging in today require a lot of foot soldiers. Extortion, controlling rural areas that are very expensive. Armed and criminal groups, particularly dissidents of the former FARC and the ELN, relied very heavily on children for this role.
It's a very effective recruiting tool. It's very dangerous. It's one that's extremely difficult for the government to combat.
Petro's total peace promised dialogue and reform. Instead, violence persisted, and with it, trust and hope began to fade. But why did it fail?
There was an assumption that sitting down with these groups and just having the will to negotiate peace would yield a solution.
The leadership of one group might say, okay, this is the time to do a peace deal with Petro. But within that cartel, there'd be rebels who say, what is our incentive to sign a deal with what they actually see as a weakened government?
Armed and criminal groups were not sitting down at the table in good faith, but rather came to the table in order to see if there could be tactical and operational benefits for them.
Since that Total Peace initiative, cocaine production has soared. So you have this massive flood of money funding these groups. What is their incentive to say we're going to turn our backs on all that?
With elections looming, the question remains, what will it take to bring peace?
I think the focus for an incoming administration really has to be on safeguarding the civilian population, who are quite literally in the middle of this conflict. In the total peace negotiations so far, I think this has been a real weakness. Their focus has not been on de-escalating violence, and the starting point really has to be improving the conditions for the civilian population.
The likelihood is that there will be a swing to the right in the next election in 2026. In this region, governments that have taken a real hard line against gangs, notably in El Salvador, the president there, Bukele, has found himself enormously popular. So there is an appetite for a much harder line.
As peace efforts stall and violence grows, Colombia's 60-year war grinds on with no end in sight. With the welfare of millions hanging in the balance, the question now is, will the next government get closer to peace or lose further ground to those who profit from chaos?